Harry Houdini wasn't just any illusionist. He embodied the very idea of surpassing boundaries that seemed insurmountable. From his escapes out of water tanks to steel shackles that he broke without anyone noticing, the impression left was that nothing could keep him trapped. In a sense, his name became synonymous with escaping the impossible, leaving audiences around the world astonished. Yet behind the curtain was a man who wasn't satisfied merely making people believe in magic. He also enjoyed revealing the truth, especially when it meant unmasking those who exploited people's credulity. Houdini, born Eric Weiss, was obsessed with perfection in his shows, rigorously training so that each movement would appear spontaneous. But the most intriguing part of his personality, curiously enough, wasn't his flair for illusion, but the fascination he felt for what couldn't be explained by stage tricks alone. The story of how he became the greatest escapist in the world merges with an intense battle against phony mediums, people who, he insisted, preyed on the grief of those who had lost loved ones. It's ironic that, for someone so skeptical, Houdini ended up leaving a kind of loophole for the supernatural. A will that contained what looked like a simple request, but which over time revealed itself to be remarkable. If you think this final wish was merely an interesting tidbit, get ready, because everything surrounding the life and death of this performer seems to have been designed to amaze, confuse, and prompt reflection. Imagine the scene: a world-famous illusionist who spent his life defying shackles, sealed coffins, and locked tanks, decides to create a secret code known only to him and his wife. Why? What would motivate someone whose career was dedicated to showing that everything can have a concrete explanation, even what appears to be pure mysticism? In his last days, Houdini pondered the possibility of something beyond the physical realm, and although he publicly denied the legitimacy of spiritualist séances, deep down he might have wanted to test this other side for himself. Thus arose the infamous final trick, a request that, after his death, his wife would attempt to communicate with his spirit, using that code as proof of authenticity. Let's be honest, it sounds like a movie script. History's greatest illusionist leaves behind a riddle that only he could solve. Did Houdini, to some extent, believe he could even cheat death by sending a message from the beyond? Or was it one more stagecraft move designed to confuse frauds and definitively show there was no genuine communication with the departed? While many see it as evidence that he secretly wanted to believe, others view it as his final blow against those swindling people in mourning. One way or another, this last wish confronted everyone with an unsettling question. Could Houdini deliver a show from beyond the grave? It's precisely here that the story grows even more intriguing. Intrigued by the idea? Then let's uncover, step by step, how this request shook so many minds, and how a single line in a will can keep alive, forever, the legacy of someone who spent his life making the impossible look real. Harry Houdini, born Eric Weiss, started life in modest circumstances. Yet he demonstrated from an early age a unique aptitude for captivating and mystifying the people around him. While many young men sought out stable trades, he was determined to stand out in the entertainment world. At one point, he adopted the stage name Houdini in homage to the Frenchman Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, recognized as the father of modern magic. However, unlike many illusionists of his day, Houdini wasn't content doing just small parlor tricks. Drawn to challenges, he climbed the ranks until he reached large stages, creating shows that were increasingly perilous and seemingly impossible to carry out. Escaping from handcuffs became his signature move, but over time the public realized he went far beyond that. Even submerged in water tanks, locked chains, or sealed structures, Houdini found a way to get free, almost as if he had the power to dissolve the tangible reality around him. Underneath every performance lay a relentless pursuit of technical perfection. He'd spend hours rehearsing each motion, measuring precisely how long it would take the crowd's adrenaline to peak. When he emerged unscathed, the audience would go wild with excitement. His fame grew to the point of making him a cultural icon, with towering posters, newspaper ads, and a celebrity aura following him wherever he went. Yet behind that public persona was a man who was extraordinarily disciplined and, above all, skeptical of the supernatural. Ironically, while he defied logic through his feats, he found himself increasingly questioning the line between the real and the imaginary. Perhaps for that reason, amidst his grand tours, he grew drawn to a theme that fascinated the society of his time: the appearance of mediums and spiritualist groups claiming to communicate with the dead. Houdini, who understood illusionary manipulation like no one else, quickly saw the likely deceit in many so-called phenomena. Houdini's fight against fraudulent mediums was almost a personal crusade. He observed how so many bereaved families were easily convinced by table tapping, strange noises, and whispers said to be from beyond. For someone who knew the illusion's trade inside out, these tricks appeared far too basic. But for those longing for answers, they felt like real divine signs. Houdini was profoundly disturbed by this. Not that he completely ruled out the possibility of something beyond material life. He never wholly dismissed occurrences that couldn't be quickly explained. What enraged him was seeing individuals profit from others' despair, employing cold reading tactics or forged objects to fake spiritual contact. Once Houdini infiltrated a spiritualist séance to gauge the medium and ended up spectacularly revealing how she was faking the manifestations, completely dismantling her credibility. Newspapers covered the event, further solidifying his reputation as a charlatan hunter. From that point forward, he was invited to expose numerous others, effectively turning it into a second show in his career. Audiences loved watching him pick apart the flaws behind supposed supernatural phenomena, enjoying the mix of education and entertainment he served up. The setting varied, sometimes a small room, sometimes a large theater, but the setup remained the same. Houdini would sit beside the medium, carefully observing everything from lighting and table items to the position of their hands. If he spotted any sign of a trick, he had no hesitation in jumping up to explain to everyone exactly how it had been fabricated. This fame for unmasking frauds made him a polarizing figure among those who sincerely believed in the supernatural. Some hailed him as a champion of truth, others condemned him for undermining faith and showing no mercy to those merely seeking comfort. Amid these differing viewpoints, Houdini stood firm in his mission: to differentiate the artistic illusion he adored from the deception that exploited human sorrow. Amid this battle against false mediums, Houdini also sustained a grueling performance schedule. He traveled incessantly, bringing his act to ever larger audiences, always introducing fresh routines so the public would never see the same thing twice. Sometimes he'd conduct his famous escapes outdoors, attracting crowds to the streets, all waiting to see if there was any device in the world that could truly hold him. There was a particular symbiosis between the showman and his admirers. They believed that if Houdini could free himself from any physical snare, then he might help them free themselves from emotional hardships or misleading beliefs. Perhaps that's why many sought his advice, hoping his power might be transferable. Yet he remained down to earth. He often emphasized that no matter how miraculous it seemed, everything had a logical explanation. He'd say the human mind was the most powerful tool that existed, and with practice and determination, nearly every barrier could be overcome. His faith in human ability was so strong that on multiple occasions he was asked to lecture at clubs and scientific societies, discussing concentration, focus, and the physical body's limits. In one such lecture, legend has it that Houdini explained how personal confidence was the key to performing precision movements. He mentioned, for example, how he taught himself to hold his breath for longer and longer periods, practicing alone in a bathtub filled with cold water. He noted that if one's fear of failure surpassed one's self-confidence, no trick could save you. Interestingly, it was that same line of reasoning he applied to exposing mediums. In the end, many of them took advantage of the fears people had of facing loss without any hope of answers. In Houdini's view, the formula was clear. A keen observer, familiar with misdirection techniques and crowd psychology, could dismantle any masquerade. With that conviction, he continued building his career, unaware that fate would offer him a far more personal reflection once death began looming larger. Houdini's life began taking a different turn when he realized the toll his physically demanding stunts were taking on his body. Some of his escapes, involving harsh impacts or extended periods without oxygen, left him with lingering ailments. There were close calls too. In one performance, he nearly drowned by mishandling a simple detail when tying his gear. Fortunately, he was saved in time, but the sense of vulnerability, something he'd never previously admitted, began to shadow his thoughts. At the same time, he watched friends and acquaintances pass away, whether from accidents or illnesses. He also witnessed the profound anguish felt by families who hadn't been able to say goodbye properly or glean any reassurance that their loved ones were at peace in the afterlife. Such events shook the fierce skeptic within him. Although he continued disbelieving so-called spiritual communications, he increasingly asked himself if something genuine might be lurking out there. After all, if he could defy logic in his escapes, why not at least consider that the unknown might hold a few surprises? Not that Houdini suddenly became a believer, far from it, but confronting mortality drove him to think more seriously about issues like death, legacy, and what traces we leave behind. In certain letters to close friends, he mentioned the possibility of a code or key he might construct, so that if there were indeed an other side, he would attempt to use it as a messaging device. Many simply dismissed this, believing it to be yet another of his eccentric schemes. But as time wore on, and the daily grind of pain and exertion signaled that his body wouldn't remain strong forever, this idea quietly took shape, becoming arguably the greatest mystery of his departure. Meanwhile, even as he contemplated mortality and spirituality, Houdini continued delivering magnificent performances. Sometimes he appeared determined to push his boundaries even further, as if trying to prove to himself that he could rise above earthly limitations. Slowly, though, his wife, Bess Houdini, noticed another aspect of her husband. Away from the spotlight, his talk of spirituality was more open-minded, tinged with genuine curiosity. True, he still railed against any fraud who crossed his path, but he was no longer so quick to dismiss the possibility that there might be truths in realms unseen. In this atmosphere, one evening he called her in for a serious conversation, unveiling his intention to leave a definitive challenge to the world after he was gone. He explained how for years he had been deeply troubled by how people were fooled by phony signs from beyond. On the other hand, he said, if there truly was something after death, he wanted to be the first to prove unequivocally that communication was possible. And how would he accomplish that? The plan was simple in theory, yet ingenious. Fashion a code known only to himself and his wife, composed of words or sequences no one else could guess. That way, if any medium claimed to have a message from Houdini's spirit, his wife could check whether that medium revealed the correct code. If so, it would be final proof that the impossible had occurred. If not, yet another charlatan would be laid bare. Bess, his steadfast companion, was astounded by the proposal. She knew Houdini's nature well enough to realize this wasn't just a stage gimmick, this was practically a life mission. If there truly was such a thing as post-mortem communication, her husband intended to be on the front line, and, of course, with one foot firmly in logic to avoid being swayed by sentimentality. So was born the secret code that Houdini and Bess shared, an element he integrated into his final instructions without telling the wider public what it entailed. To many, this action felt like an extension of his stage performance, a plotline devised to keep his name alive beyond his last breath. Others saw it as a clear sign that, deep down, the greatest illusionist of all time yearned to believe not every boundary is impassable. The ironic detail was that at the same time, he carried on pointing out the inconsistencies of various mediumistic practices, as if to say, if anyone's going to prove the supernatural is real, it'll be me. Even so, those around him noted how his health was gradually deteriorating, a result of a lifetime of physical risks, plus his stubborn habit of ignoring the body's warning signs. Rumors began to swirl in the world of illusionists that Houdini was preparing one last grand stunt, fueling curiosity and speculation. As usual, he left no explicit confirmations, but dropped hints that, even after death, he might still astonish everyone. It's precisely here that the story grows even more mysterious, for his years of shows, escapes, and revelations of charlatans would intersect with the fundamental question, did he, in the end, believe there was something beyond death? Bess, on her side, was preparing herself emotionally to fulfill her husband's request if need be. But that's for the next section, where we'll see how the seeds Houdini planted took shape after he departed, leaving the entire world wondering if the man who escaped handcuffs and chains had, in some way, also freed his spirit from the boundary between life and death. After her husband's passing, Bess Houdini found herself confronted with a task that bordered on the surreal, trying to reach an illusionist who had always refused to trust the supernatural blindly. Though her heart was heavy with longing, she wasn't there just for solace. She held the instructions Houdini had left in his will, involving that secret code. At first, many of her friends advised forgetting the matter altogether, saying it would be emotionally draining and unproductive to keep prodding the spirit realm. Yet Bess knew Houdini's mind better than anyone. If he had laid out this plan in life, it clearly had a higher purpose. With a courage reminiscent of her late husband, she made up her mind to follow his request exactly. The initial spiritualist sessions took place in discreet settings, aimed mainly at keeping his memory alive and perhaps gleaning any meaningful sign. Yet word soon spread, and before long, well-known mediums were reaching out, each one insisting they had the power to hear Houdini's voice from beyond. Bess deep down understood that the definitive proof was contained in their code. Without that, everything was just a guess. Still, as time passed, she realized how many different people were eager to take part in this effort. Some came from far away, claiming to have prophetic dreams. Others arrived with items they said belonged to the magician. When she opened her door for these visitors, she saw in their eyes a mix of curiosity and belief. And in the midst of all these attempts, there was Bess, unwavering in her mission, scrutinizing every word spoken, every odd gesture, every message mediums claimed to receive. In many ways, it was reminiscent of Houdini himself, ever watchful for little tells of trickery or manipulation. Each failed session, failing to produce the code, brought a sigh from Bess. Part of her desperately yearned for an impossible confirmation, yet part of her insisted that if somebody at last revealed that secret, it would be a truly supernatural feat. Over time, Bess's annual sessions became well known among curious individuals and spiritualist devotees. More than once, local newspapers reported, "Houdini's widow tests yet another medium." This piqued the interest of new generations who barely knew of the escapist's feats but were enthralled by the possibility he could return in some capacity. Each anniversary of Houdini's death, a small group would gather around Bess in dimly lit rooms, hopeful that something magical might occur. Some of these gatherings took place in hotels, theater halls, or close friends' homes, always charged with that mystical tension. It wasn't unusual for attendees to feel they were part of a historic event. After all, they were attempting to converse with the man who had overcome every physical barrier in life. Their curiosity grew, and so did the ranks of professional or amateur mediums eager to test their skills. Bess's approach, though, balanced openness with caution. She would politely listen to each medium and allow them to carry out their rites or trances, but the moment any alleged communication kicked off, she examined it with a hawk-like gaze, almost reliving Houdini's investigative mindset. The arrangement was straightforward. If his spirit truly manifested, it had to pronounce or write the exact code they had agreed upon in life. In some sessions, sets of letters or numbers came close, for a fleeting second, giving the impression they might match the code. Bess would hold her breath only to realize it wasn't the correct sequence. Other times, mediums delivered long speeches saying they felt Houdini's presence, yet failed to articulate what needed to be said. Each failure, then, reinforced the notion that if there was genuinely a realm beyond death, it still had provided no conclusive proof. Ironically, many of those mediums, upon being challenged, accused Bess of blocking the phenomenon by her excessive skepticism, causing friction and even arguments among the attendees. Persisting with the annual will instructions went beyond a simple ritual for Bess. It was not just about seeing her husband again, but about honoring the legacy of a man who spent his life trying to make clear the boundary between what's real and what's illusion. Houdini mentioned in various letters the significance of proving something beyond any doubt, leaving no loopholes for stage gimmicks or psychological manipulation, and it was precisely that unshakable evidence Bess pursued. Sometimes she admitted to close friends that although she knew it was unlikely, a small part of her heart still whispered that maybe, just maybe, his spirit could surprise them all. She vividly recalled Houdini's claims that if anyone were to confirm life after death, it would be him, a master of escaping confinement and crossing boundaries. At the same time, the emotional strain was heavy. Every unsuccessful session reopened her wounds of loss. Dealing with the media posed an extra challenge. Tabloid reporters flocked to the story, dramatizing or even forging alleged discoveries. Meanwhile, Bess strove to maintain as much dignity as possible in the process. She'd host mediums in small groups, insisting there be no fees to avert accusations of profiteering, and she wanted neutral observers present. Occasionally, she invited illusionism experts to observe, to spot any con. Thus, almost a scientific atmosphere was created to address an utterly subjective matter, post-mortem communication. And in this fashion, she warded off opportunists craving fame at Houdini's expense. Still, no matter her rigorous standards, hope always lingered. What if this time he truly shows up? As years went by, Bess arranged some of her sessions in increasingly dramatic ways. Once she conducted a séance atop a hotel under candlelight, as though setting the perfect stage for the impossible to occur. Other times she favored the privacy of her own home with only a few trusted friends. In these gatherings, each time a medium arrived with breakthrough methods or theories, an air of anticipation filled the room. Could this be it? Yet the code remained elusive. Sometimes someone would say they received only part of the letters. Sometimes a voice was allegedly heard whispering something close, but never close enough. This certainly didn't stop rumors from circulating. At one point, word spread that Bess had admitted to someone that yes, the code had been revealed, but she preferred to keep it hidden. She promptly denied this in several interviews, reaffirming that she still waited on a clearly indisputable outcome. The lack of definitive proof, in a way, underscored Houdini's legacy as a man who left no room for half measures. The silent beyond seemed to say all or nothing. For onlookers, every new session felt akin to another act in the show Houdini had constructed in his lifetime. Within this framework, Bess became a sort of posthumous stage assistant, managing the spectacle while simultaneously grappling with her private grief. Interestingly, this pursuit joined the history of illusionism itself. New generations of magicians began studying these session accounts, viewing them as a prime example of how a performance can transcend death if orchestrated meticulously. And the question inevitably persisted. If the spirit of the greatest escapist roamed somewhere, wouldn't he be the perfect one to defy the rules and deliver the exact code? Each year that ended without an answer made the enigma all the more famous. Alongside those official gatherings, there were also impromptu claims from people insisting they'd received revelations about the code. Some fantasized about a very vivid dream in which Houdini appeared, reciting letters or symbols. Others swore that in moments of meditation, they sensed a presence handing them cryptic clues. Bess generally paid little mind to such unsolicited stories, holding to the notion that if a breakthrough was ever to happen, it would be in a formal setting under close scrutiny. Sometimes she'd receive letters from distant corners, written by strangers, proclaiming they had solved it all. Of course, she would discreetly check, only to find nothing matched what she needed to hear. Thus the code remained in the shadows. Unsurprisingly, conspiracy theories emerged. Some contended that Houdini himself had erased the real code from Bess's mind, perhaps through hypnosis. Others believed Bess, upon realizing how historically valuable the enigma was, had chosen to seal it away, even if a medium had guessed it. Still another group argued that Houdini never really intended for the code to be discovered. It was merely a masterstroke designed to mock, posthumously, self-professed communicators with the beyond. Whatever the truth, curiosity only grew in spiritualist magazines and among illusionists, all analyzing each new claim with a critical eye. Meanwhile, Bess's own reputation evolved, from grieving widow to the keeper of one of the most celebrated secrets in the performing arts. In interviews, she presented a calm sadness, never allowing any sign that she was giving in to fantasy. She stood fast in the stance she inherited from her husband. Only concrete facts could settle this matter. As the years wore on, it became increasingly apparent that Houdini's code might never be conclusively revealed. Bess persevered in holding the sessions for a while, though with age she began cutting back and yielding to the natural strains of the ordeal. Meanwhile, enthusiasts and researchers continued to pore over the accounts, combing for overlooked hints. Even so, Houdini's will, stipulating these attempts be made, lived on in collective memory, ever prodding the imaginations of new admirers who discovered his story. And though no one managed to break the silence from beyond, the mere fact of this code kept the spark of mystery alive. Ironically, the staunchest skeptic regarding spiritual phenomena ended up creating one of the longest-lasting legends within that realm. And it seems inevitable that whenever the date of his death draws near, people ask themselves, will someone appear this time with the correct answer? Some even try to recreate the old seances, hoping somehow to catch vibrations from the old escapist. In the end, the entire narrative only enlarges the aura surrounding Houdini's name, making him more than a simple magician, an icon who, perhaps unwittingly, wove together science, spectacle, and spirituality into a single story. But if you think the tale ends here, bear in mind there's still a bigger riddle in play. Was the code truly unsolvable, or did someone come close to cracking it? Well, that's precisely what we'll address in the next section, where the twists grow ever more riveting, and we confront the unavoidable question, did Houdini somehow prove that even death can be deceived? Decades passed since Bess Houdini led her seances, but the puzzle of that secret code lingered, fueling stories and gossip. Some even swore that at one point she really did receive a genuine message, but opted not to disclose it publicly. Others claimed the entire effort was a complete dead end, with no concrete signal of communication. Either way, even after Bess's death, the mystery was never fully laid to rest. Every now and again, radio or TV shows surface, returning to the subject by interviewing mediums who say they have the right message. Still, not one of them has indisputably convinced anyone. For many Houdini devotees, this lack of undeniable proof only reaffirmed one conclusion. He remains steadfast in demonstrating that unless there's crystal clear evidence, there's likely no contact at all. Yet certain paranormal researchers suggested the conditions of the seances were never quite right, or that Bess, unknowingly, could have obstructed the true manifestation. Ultimately, each viewpoint mirrors some aspect of Houdini's legacy, the showman who, in life, taught how easily our eyes can be tricked, while also cracking open the door to the idea there may be more mysteries than we can readily explain. When we extend the conversation to bring this saga to a close, it's nearly impossible not to think about the impact Houdini's will made on the discussion between science, faith, and illusion. It wasn't just a routine legal document, but rather a direct challenge to the unknown, as though Houdini were proclaiming, here's my final card, prove you can contact me. And let's be honest, few historical figures have blended skepticism and hope for something beyond as elegantly as he did. Houdini dedicated his career to exploring the boundaries of human perception, whether by conjuring astonishing illusions or exposing fraudulent predators who profited off grief. By establishing a secret code with Bess, he gave us a post-death roadmap capable of intriguing entire generations. Nobody knows for certain if this enigma will ever be solved, but the fact it lives on in conversation and in documentaries shows how even a small set of words can outlive its era. It's almost as if the greatest escapist of all time has continued in some way to slip free from the shackles of death. So did Houdini speak from beyond or not? That question echoes in every recounting of botched seances and each new explanation for what went on behind closed doors. While some people swear up and down that he divulged the code, others offer cogent reasons to doubt it. It seems we're facing a dilemma without a verdict, one of those mysteries history delights in preserving. Some interpret it all as posthumous marketing, arguing that Houdini planned this final trick to ensure his name was never forgotten. Meanwhile, there are those who think he truly yearned for a loophole that would prove death isn't the finish line for all possibilities. In the end, maybe Houdini's greatest magic was precisely that, leaving the entire world arguing, so many years later, over whether he actually overcame the barrier dividing the living from the dead. What do you make of this mystery-laden story? Could science one day deliver proof of real contact, fulfilling the illusionist's last wish? Or is it just another sign that the hereafter remains unreachable? Sometimes the boundary between skepticism and belief is as fragile as the chains Houdini snapped in his escape acts. Perhaps that's the lesson he left us. Keep an open mind to the possibilities, yet never fail to question every supposed miracle. So share your thoughts below. Do you believe he gave an authentic message from the other side? Or do you think it was just the final illusion? And of course, if you'd like to discover more astonishing stories of wills that challenge logic and history, subscribe to The Secrets of Wills and hit the notification bell. After all, the realm of the unknown always holds surprises, and who knows? Maybe in a future seance, we'll find the definitive clue to decode Houdini's secret.